What would you say you do here?
Oh, wow. Technical difficulties. I'm going to skip the pleasantries and try to bring our guests in. So we got Chris and Bryan. We're back. The whole gang is back for Pro versus Joe 2021. Here's Bryan. Hey, Bryan.
Hey, John.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, of course you can. Because you said let's bring in our guest. Hey, Chris.
How are you?
Sorry about
that. It's been a while.
Yes, indeed. So this is our second attempt at one Pro versus Joe. So Bryan, do you notice anything in the background there at Chris's?
The number of national championships that Oregon has won.
That is brutal.
Oh,
that is brutal. You can't really say anything.
we can't.
I told Chris on the conversation we had on Tuesday that I wore my Ducks quarter zip to the office one day, and I was told I could never wear it again.
Yeah. We had a ceremonial burning session afterwards.
Still one of my favorite quarter zips. So, well, Chris, we started the conversation on Tuesday about financial planning and those kinds of things. I think I sent over some of the questions. I don't want to put you on the spot right away, but what a crazy year 2020 was, right? As far as
there was a lot. There was a lot. And that in and of itself is a loaded question. And you're definitely not putting me on the spot, man. I mean, I can think on my feet. So you fire away and we'll have some fun. So, because I've got some fun stuff in store for you. So,
well, that was part of how we framed it. Was I think every entrepreneur, right? Bryan and I both dabble in the stocks. I think Bryan's probably more pro than I am. I would be the Joe in that regard. So we want to kind of frame that in some personal investment concepts, and then also, what can business people do, the question is always, how do you make your money make money, right? So both personally and professionally. Did you win on GameStop, Bryan?
No.
Were you on the front end?
No, not. Trying to get on halfway in, it was too late, as usual. Once you hear about it, it's already been done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as far as the question of, how you get your money to make money and how to invest and what to invest in, that is, just to be blunt, the wrong first question to ask. Sure. Because if you think about it this way, and there's so many analogies, that's the one thing in finance, there's an infinite amount of analogies. I'm sure in construction it's the same thing, but one of the big ones is when I hear someone say, what's the next stock to invest in, or what's the best piece of real estate, or whatever that type of question is, in my mind, I'm thinking you're asking how to learn to sprint, where you haven't even learned to run, and you really haven't learned to walk. Last year, kind of piggybacking off last time we spoke, John, it was a scary year for a number of things, specifically financially. what I see as the biggest fear is people were able to do things that I would not necessarily say are prudent. And again, the big fear is they got away with it.
Yeah.
And eventually that time will stop and it'll cease. And unfortunately, when that time comes, it's too late.
Yeah. And
it doesn't really matter how much you're worth. It doesn't matter if you're an employee, a business owner. In some instances, it would especially matter if you're a business owner, depending on what business you're in. I can tell you, friends of mine that are in the restaurant business would tell you that more than ever. And you can't keep printing money. I think with...
But you can.
You can.
Technically.
Okay, so here's my question.
Consequences, right?
Yeah, I'm 100% joking.
Yeah, I got it. But like a lot of people, I've had conversations with people and they go, well, you just need to keep printing money. And I go, well, if that happens, what is going to happen? And
who's paying for it, and when do we pay for it?
Right. So it's it's one of those things where you got to balance everything, but eventually the piper's got to be paid. And people need to think about that. But the cool thing is with planning is the only thing you can really control is yourself. Yeah. So, instead of talking about how to get ahead on the investment side, I would reframe it to how do you start to be as financially prudent as possible and stable as possible. So when I have people come into the office, that's something that is absolutely huge because everyone wants the next shiny object, the next sexy object. And a lot of times that is not, you got to think of it as a moat. You just keep building the moat and be more and more stable financially. And if you don't have that core in place, you're in a lot of trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. So I think one of the biggest things to do is to really just start with the fundamentals of what are you spending? I know this sounds really simple, but I was reading this, I think it was like 2 or 3 days ago. 60 to 65% of Americans could not cover an emergency fund above $400 if it came up. And that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy to think about, because I'm not saying $400 is not a lot of money, and I'm not saying it's a lot of money, but there's not a lot of room for error.
Right.
So, even just looking at something like that and going, oh my gosh, now I'm ahead of 60% of my peers. That's pretty crazy. And I'm not saying it's a contest. That's another thing you got to remove when you're talking about planning. It's a common question. People will always ask me, how am I doing? And they expect me to give you an answer relative to their peers. Yeah. And it's not a contest. It's really not. We've helped people that are retired. They have maybe 100, 200,000 to their name, and they live perfectly comfortably, versus we may have clients that have $1 million or $2 million. And every time I chat with them, I go, you are pushing the envelope on tipping the scale a little bit. Right. So it's an all relative term, and people don't like that. They don't like hearing it's relative. And frankly, the reason why I started my podcast, Capitalize, a podcast for intelligent investors, is it removes a lot of that, right? Becoming a capitalizer and getting into the financial aspect of, I'm capitalizing myself. I'm capitalizing my financial situation. Not to mention you could capitalize a whole heck of a lot more outside of your finances. But just to kind of dip a toe into what that life looks like, if you capitalize on your finances and go through this framework and process that I'm taking people through on my show, you remove I'm going to compare myself to the pro versus Joe, or I'm going to compare myself to my best friend, or I'm going to compare myself to my boss or my manager, because a lot of people do that. I think we're all guilty of that, especially as entrepreneurs and someone that wants to grow and get after it.
The competitive edge.
Yeah. I mean, I have an incredible partnership with Lucia Capital Group, and I'll even ask the chairman or the president, like, hey, every once in a while, I've got to stop myself from asking, how am I doing relative to everyone else? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I know we kind of went off topic and tangent, but when it comes to the investment question, it should never start with the investment. It should start with the plan.
Yeah.
Always with the plan and building that foundation. We're all football fans. Okay. Whether or not you're a fan of the Oregon Ducks or not, which would be a shame if you're not, but regardless, like being a football fan, I use this analogy a ton. So when the Seahawks had Marshawn Lynch, so let's go back in time a little bit. When you have a football and you're on offense, what are you trying to do? You're trying to score.
Sure.
Right? Preferably a touchdown, but you're trying to get points on the board. So how I use that analogy is, okay, the Seahawks, they're probably going to run the ball more because they have Marshawn Lynch. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but just hold on. Just let me finish on this one, right? So generally speaking, they're going to run the ball, but they can't do it every single play because in the NFL, you realize that that's not going to work out. So then you have maybe Russell dish it out to Doug Baldwin when he was there, or Jimmy Graham over the edge, or then you got Tyler Lockett just flying down the field, which still happens today. So you surround these kind of satellite strategies around the core strategy of running the ball for the entire purpose of scoring a touchdown. Yeah. So if you want to think about it this way, your investment question was picking the Doug Baldwin or the Tyler Lockett or the Jimmy Graham, but you haven't even focused on the core of what you're trying to do for the purpose of achieving what you want.
So I'm more of a Detroit Lions investor then.
Oh, okay. Then you're just sad.
Well, so the number one question you got to ask yourself, though, is which celebrity financial advisor you're going to, encamp around, right? So let me see if I can. Does this work? If I can share my screen.
Is that a coyote behind you?
That's my dog.
So are you asking as far as
I'm trying to see if this will share. Okay, here we go. So is that showing up on your screen? Jeez.
Yes.
Oh, here we go. Okay. So are you seeing what I'm seeing?
I am.
Is this Bryan? Are you familiar with this fine gentleman?
Very much so.
Yeah. So obviously so you mentioned this, Chris. You mentioned him. Is he widely known in the financial? I guess there's no way to not get around knowing who Dave Ramsey is, right?
You'd be shocked. I think it depends what area of the country too. I think if you're in the southeastern states, he's all over the place. I mean, it's funny. We have clients in Tennessee, and his name it's all over.
Well, I think he's become synonymous with churches too, like especially the evangelical Protestant churches.
Yes, he is.
I like to joke he's like the fourth member of the Trinity.
Yeah. Well, that's actually how he got popular.
Yeah.
Which I could go into kind of a tangent there. And I'll tell you, just first and foremost, I will not talk negatively about individual celebrities.
Well, let's talk.
But what I will say is there are concepts that I may or may not like. So I'll let viewers and listeners at home decipher kind of where that's at. So one thing I'll give Ramsey credit on is he's a heck of a marketer. That's undeniable. He's been doing it for long enough where it's like, hey, he's compounded, if you want to use a financial term, such a massive following that, it's it's pretty hard to argue. It's kind of it's almost like a cult.
Yeah.
And I get why.
You brought up the no emergency fund. That's a big Ramsey principle. You probably violated copyright law by even bringing it up, the emergency fund.
Just don't say envelopes.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'll give. Here's what I'll say about Ramsey that I'll give credit for. Right. So his thing on snowballing. So I talk about this on my show a lot. Behavioral finance. There's a gigantic divide between what I'll tell you academically, or what's out there academically, and then what emotionally feels good. So, what I don't want to say I go against the grain on, but I really make a gigantic focus and emphasis on making sure that the academic and emotion are the same. Because when you just go on the emotional side of things and you just feel really good, that's not necessarily the right thing to do. And that actually works with everything in life. But when it comes to finance, especially today, right? The whole snowballing effect. Snowballing can work, and it does work, but is it necessarily always the right thing to do? Sure. That's the other thing. I will tell you, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you put a definitive term. So in our industry, if you're regulated, which I'm heavily regulated, you can't say always or nevers, because there really isn't an always or nevers. And when you hear someone like a celebrity come out and say something like that, anyone behind the scenes is looking, going, gosh, that is so not the case. I mean, I'll use it personally, right? So personally, I have Crohn's disease, so I can't really do Advil. Okay. There's no knock on Advil. Advil is a great drug, and people have done really well, and companies have made a lot of money off of Advil. So for me, I can really only do Tylenol. But that doesn't mean Advil is bad. But if someone comes out and says everyone needs to take Advil,
yeah,
you have other people with Crohn's or IBS or colitis, and they all start taking it, you're gonna get in trouble. But yet that person isn't necessarily the most regulated, if regulated at all. So, when it comes back to the snowballing effect, that works to a certain point when it comes to being prudent and smart with it. And that's what Capitalize is all about. And being a capitalizer is gaining that knowledge in blending the academic and emotion. So for example, if you have a mortgage today, mortgage rates are historically low.
Yeah.
It might be ticking up a little bit, but regardless, in the grand scheme,
it was 1.5%. It just ticked up.
Well, so you're talking about the 10-year Treasury, and that's at about 1.6 right now, and that doesn't really relate to the mortgage world, but
it affected some people's loans because we had
a little bit. They indirectly connect, but as far as debt goes, let's say you have a 30-year mortgage at somewhere between 2 to 3, actually even 2 to 4%. That's really low. That's a good rate. And that's not necessarily a bad debt to have, right? You get to write off a little bit on your taxes. You get some deduction. It's nothing like it used to be, but it's something. And you're also, you're paying it down. Your home value over time, hopefully, knock on wood, right? In theory, will go up. But in the long run, can you take any excess dollars that you may have and earn more than the 2 to 3 to 4%? And I think the answer would be yes. I can't guarantee it, of course, but the longer time period you have more relative certainties. And I'm being cognizantly cautious of my wording there because I don't want to make anything definitive. But when you hear someone go, oh, you just need to snowball your debt, that is good and that is right, but there's an asterisk there. As far as know,
Well, I think, though, one thing he has helped a lot of people is we've been so cavalier with debt for so long that I mean, it's almost the extreme opposite, right, of what the trend has been.
sure.
So whereas get your financial house in order, right? Because so the just if there's a few people that don't know, right, the basics of his thing is your first thing is is it like $500 or $1,000 savings, $1,000, right? And then start the debt snowball like you talked about, which is a snowball means you take your smallest credit, whatever it is, attack it till it's over, and then roll that payment, snowball it into the next, right? Which is a good strategy for paying off credit cards, because a lot of people ask, like, where do you even start, right? And then it's get the 3 to 6 months of savings, right? So those are pretty sound principles, but like you're saying, it's not a blanket applies to everybody, right? So when you were talking about the FDA, are you talking about in finances? Is there such a thing as the energy drink of financial advice? Whereas, because like the energy drinks, if it's I don't know. Maybe you guys know more about this, but like, they're not a nutritional, or if you're a supplement, it's not as regulated, right? So are you saying there's that in the financial world where people can fly under the radar?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, I won't say that people can fly. If they can fly under the radar, that doesn't last forever. Eventually, you get pinged for that. I guess my piece would be, if you've got someone telling you something in the world of finance and it's on display for the world to see, I would do some digging to see how regulated they actually are. No one reads those tiny little disclosures at the end of every commercial, and also they're up for like half of a second if they're up there. But it's without naming names, it's kind of interesting looking up some of these people and going, wow, that's why they can say certain things. Because if I said any of that on the air, or if I said any of that I wouldn't even be able to say some of this stuff on my show, because unless I had like concrete research. And frankly, I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, when I go through my show, and I've got a series after a lot of these interviews, again, with Capitalize Your Finances, my framework. If I'm going to tell you a fact, first, I mean, it sounds almost foolish for me to say, because it's like, of course, if I'm going to tell you a fact, I got to show you where I got it from. I can't just say, well, because I said so.
Yeah.
Right.
Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, because I'm not coming out here to say, I don't want like that cultishness behind you. Listen to someone and their word is almost gospel. That's not how the world works.
That's how Pro versus Joe works. I mean, thousands.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like
we're unregulated, so
yeah. So
that's what you think.
My big thing is when I'm going and I'm giving advice and I'm telling people this stuff, this is what's going to be really cool, because again, not to sound redundant, but being a capitalizer is all about having that burning desire to conquer everything and anything in your life. And Capitalize Your Finances is the first of many parts of what being a capitalizer is all about, not to give too much away. But when it comes to myself giving people this, I look at myself as a guinea pig. I call myself the capitalized guinea pig. Yes, I'm the Cap and Capitalize. Those are my initials. But I've taken all of this time and all of this energy and all of this research, and I just want to give all of that back. I don't need someone to be like, oh my gosh, like, like any of these celebrities. I mean, you mentioned Ramsey. Let's use Ramsey. Oh my gosh, well, you got to do this because Ramsey said so.
Right.
I would much rather have someone say, I listened to Chris and I listened to Cap, and gosh, Chris that guy put out some facts, and I took that and I utilized it to my own, and it was me. That's the big difference, right? I don't necessarily need that limelight in it. It's I'm giving you the tools, and then you can become your own capitalizer. That's what's really exciting about that financial kind of movement that we've got building. But that's a kind of, we were jumping all over the place. As far as when you're listening to these people, you really got to think, where did these people come from? How did they get there? And then if they're saying something and it's that free and they're not citing anything or using anything to back it up, you really got to scratch your head and go, okay, how much of this is actually valid? And if this is really that easy, is it right? I mean, like I would much rather go the right way versus the easy way in life. Call me crazy, but that's what we learned when we were kids. You do what's right, not necessarily what's easy. It's beautiful if the right thing is really easy to do, but sometimes the right thing's really, really hard. And sometimes it's a little bit more complex. And that's why planning, it's not cut and dry. And then you add the regulation and things that I think are prudent. And I'm definitely not knocking them. I think we need regulation because it keeps a lot of the bad apples out, and the ones that want to put themselves out there like I'm doing, you really got to watch what you say. And if you don't, you're going to get in trouble, and rightfully so, because you could hurt someone. I mean, what if I'm going to make this up. This is not true, but I'm like, oh yeah, you go buy whatever company and you're probably going to earn 30% in 5 years. And I'm being sarcastic and facetious. Someone listens and maybe they came in at the wrong time, and maybe they've been a follower of mine forever. And they go, well, I got to go do this. I got to go buy this company. And they do. And they get killed. They get absolutely killed. I was being sarcastic, but they didn't know that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. A lot of these people can say a lot of that, One thing I will say though, in particular, and John, we spoke a little bit about this earlier. Online databases like a Motley Fool, which is really common. I actually give them a ton of credit. I give a lot of these places a ton of credit. I think you can get inklings of truth within everything that you're looking up online with finance. The bummer is you can go way too in depth. Like I call it the WebMD effect. Like if you have any sickness or if you have a tingling or whatever, do not go on WebMD. Right. Like if your pinky toe is asleep and you WebMD that, you're probably going to die. That's what they're going to tell you, right? Like it's super extreme. It's super negative, whatever the case is. But like Motley Fool, for example, people always ask me, they go, do they give good advice? I'm like, wow, it's kind of the same thing. They'll give you good advice, but you're generally asking a rather surface level questions like, is debt bad? Are stocks good? Be hope, and then they'll give you an answer versus how I look at it as, okay, you've got a business owner, and I look at him going, well, sure, that stock might be good, but you got to work backwards to, do you have any market exposure? Okay, back it up. Do you have any vehicle to utilize that market exposure? Back it up. Do you have anything that you could get tax efficient with to utilize that specific investment? Back it up. Do you even have the funds in the cash flow and the spread in your income to afford all of this? Back it up. Do you even have enough cash in the bank so if something ever did happen, right? Like, so it all spirals. And very few people outside of finance, I'm actually going to go as far and say very few people within finance truly are thinking in that frame of context. And the people in finance that may think that they do, I've seen it just because I've been doing this long enough. you got to keep spiraling, and you got to keep digging deeper.
So what is on the spot, Pro versus Joe, capitalized podcast, the podcast for intelligent investors? Question of the night.
Okay.
What's the next GameStop?
What is the next GameStop?
Yeah.
Holy cow. Before or after?
Yeah, you can call it in hindsight. Well, so what are, I think I sent these over. What are, I've got the other faces. You brought up Motley Crue or Motley Fool, Motley Crue. I think they just re-released an album too, right?
Yeah.
What are 3 financial quips, things that people say, financial advice that you hear, whether it's just drum of the mill, it keeps coming up, that just make your skin crawl?
I thought about this one for a while, and it's kind of interesting in finance because these quips are not universal.
Yeah.
They kind of ebb and flow with what's going on. I would say, this is an indirect answer, one of my biggest quips that I can't stand is when people flock to a term that sounds emotionally good at the time. So one thing that I'm actually going to be talking about on our show is capitalizing your cash and everything that goes in with that. And there was you've heard the term like cash is king or cash is trash. Yeah. So that term's thrown around, or those terms have been thrown around a lot, but no one really thinks about where they come from or why they are valuable or were valuable at the time.
At the time, you said,
I'm not going to tell you when, because you'll have to go and listen to my show, and then you'll actually know the answers to all of those. But what I will tell you is it's kind of fascinating. You look at cash is king. It wasn't originated at this time, but it had a gigantic surge in popularity in 2 times over the last 20 years in particular. Number one, October 2008. It was one of the most searched financial terms. Is cash king?
And then look that up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the second one, actually, last year, so in 2020, during the COVID crash, and actually right before that, Ray Dalio, who's a hedge fund manager, fairly well-known hedge fund manager, smart dude, he coined cash is king, as everything was kind of, dipping. And I would not agree nor disagree with that, because the emotional aspect of that is when you're really terrified, what are you doing? You're flocking to the most conservative investment, cash under the mattress.
Wouldn't that date back to the Great Depression, right? Everybody pulling out, right?
Sure. Well, that was a little bit different, and there that was a lot a bit different, but it's the whole
regulation and whatnot,
yeah, and it's actually, now that you mentioned that, the whole idea of money, it's really interesting looking at how people react to their views on cash according to generations. So my my grandparents that have both passed, when they grew up in the Great Depression, it's interesting. So they grew up in the Great Depression, and that was obviously a very scary time. So they remember, for Christmas, my grandma got an orange. Like that was it. Right. And I believe my grandpa retired in around 1987, which is when the Black Friday crash hit. It was like 25% in a day. And so if you grew up in the Great Depression area and you were working that entire time, or, the majority of that time, because he was like, 6, and then you retire, and then you see a black swan event like that happen, coincidentally, when you start and finish, that's going to have a really brutal impact on your psyche, on how you look at money, versus you look at people that started working and started investing in their 401ks in 2011. They think they are the second coming, because what is everything done for the most part
since 2000,
basically gone up, right? Yeah. So people look at that and go, why would you have cash? That's just silly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an emotional thing. The quip, there's nothing in particular that really just peeves me, because these quips aren't even long. They're not even around long enough to become a universal quip, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I'll tell you my favorite quip.
Okay.
I tell people all the time, a short-term pain is a long-term gain, and it works both ways. So if you think about that, that should both scare you and excite you. Another one, and this is a theme that we have this year, is I would much rather be one of the last to be right than the first to be wrong. You can't really get hurt if you're one of the last to be right.
Well, that's like I'm not sure if it's the right way to first to be wrong. I'm not sure if it's the right way to look at it, but I've tried to. I've just dipped my toe in investing in the stock market and whatnot. And we actually had a challenge between a couple of friends where whoever could double their $100 investment first, we would all chip in something or whatever.
Sure.
But it's like trying to see the trends of what the real value of something is. Like to me, Tesla's hard to gauge because it has such high swings and whereas something like, Amazon, obviously Costco, Walmart are fairly stable. I don't know if that's the right term or whatnot, but that to say, I think I've been trying to practice that last to be right rather than the first to be wrong. I kind of view I'm at the stage with the stock market that it's like gambling, right? I only invest what I'm okay with losing. But I think you brought up on a topic like as far as like people in 2008 that would have pulled their money out, had you kept your money in, you'd be in a much better spot now, the way the market dipped and then came back up, right?
Yeah, but yes, that's true. But I want to go back to something that you brought up. So, and actually, I'll bring Bryan into this. So Bryan, safe to say you've invested a lot in your business, right? As an entrepreneur. Okay. And so when you've done that, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I happen to know you fairly well. So I would say it's safe to say that you've taken an interest to your business with an ownership mentality of, I'm going to know everything and anything about this. And even though I may have a down year in revenue, that doesn't mean that my business is a down business. Does that make sense?
100%.
So, Jon, for you, right, as far as like investing goes, if you're viewing it as a gamble, you're viewing it as a gamble. But one of my big themes on our show, when it comes to the stock side, and we've got some awesome people that are going to be coming on this show throughout the year to talk about this very subject. If you're taking your money and you're putting it in the market, let me actually take a step back. If you're putting it into anything, just hoping, man, I really hope this sticks, and you're gambling, you're going to get hurt. You will get hurt. I don't know when, but it will happen.
Let me clarify. So there's, obviously making money, and then there's what we do as our family, as far as our investments and those kinds of things. I'm talking about my fun money, investing my the crop of my savings.
Sure.
My personal savings, my allowance.
So you have an envelope that you invest.
Yeah. I take Okay, the groceries are in the right envelope, and the car bill is paid.
Sure.
And I get my $20 allowance every week from my wife.
So I would, and this is good. So I would challenge you a little bit. So
don't challenge me directly, though.
I'll challenge you indirectly. We know you're a little so when people come in and they say like, "Hey, this is my like play money or fun money," I'll nod. I'll go, "Yep, okay." But in theory, well, think about this. Leave no stone unturned. That's one of the oldest sayings in the book. It's actually a pretty good one, especially in business, growing your business. Leave no stone unturned.
Never heard Dave say that. I've never heard Dave say that. So
when it comes to dollars, I would actually go and use that saying in financials, right? So it's not leave no stone unturned. It's be prudent with every dollar you have. And so what I would challenge you with is, instead of saying, and this is taking it up a level for you. I'm definitely not trying to put you on the spot. This is going to help you down the road. So think about it this way.
Hot seat.
Let's say you have your portfolio, and I'd say 80 to 85% of it, that's like your core strategy. You understand these companies like the back of your hand. You have conviction that these companies or pieces of real estate or whatever it is that you're investing in is, you have a really good, you have in your mind that, man, I don't think this is going to be wrong, but I'm feeling pretty confident this is going to be right.
Well, my core of my strategy is Sears, Kmart. I think the Hudson's Bay Company's coming back.
High risk.
When Justin Timberlake told me to invest in MySpace, I went all in.
He's the majority shareholder of Blockbuster, just waiting for it to come back.
Nice. But no, like if you think about it this way, like if you keep the majority, and actually this is what all the institutional investors will do. So if you talk to anyone that has, I'm not talking about looking at, I oversee a couple million or 100 million. We're talking about people that oversee billions of dollars. They will tell you the exact, and I've talked to these people, and they would say the exact same thing. If you have the majority of your pie kind of as a quote unquote set it and forget it, you can be a lot more nimble with whatever you have left. So if you had 80% of your portfolio invested, set and forget, you could be a lot more creative and custom with that remaining 20. Now, I'm not going to use personal examples. Why not? Just because you gotta keep compliant here. But there have been
no one's watching this.
Not yet. It's like 8:53, right? But what I will say though is there have been multiple times where, if you think about it this way, so I would say the more money you have, the more relaxed you could be in life. I think actually everyone could say that. I could go back and forth because
you don't believe more money, more problems?
Well, that I was going to say, the larger your net worth grows, it's like a video game, right? You get to levels that you never thought existed, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It just is. But if you have an investment portfolio, and let's say you live well within your means with these investments, I'm not saying you can be more relaxed, but if you know that you've got enough dollars coming in and you can be stable, you can be a lot more calm, which means more likely than not, you're going to lead to making more prudent decisions, because at the end of the day, if you're investing or planning, it is a competition. If you're buying something, generally that means someone else is selling it. So what do you know that they don't? Or what do they know that you don't know? Right? Yeah. So if you are a lot more stable and calm and collective in your financial situation, you could maybe take on a little bit more risk with that remaining 20 or 15% or whatever it is, because you got to think about it this way. If the majority of what you have is, I don't want to say tried and true, but relatively stable, you understand it, they're reliable investments, that 20 or 15, if they do have that pop, it's kind of like a bonus, because you didn't expect it, right? But if it doesn't do as well, okay, you've got the majority of your nest egg of your portfolio that is carrying the rest of your team. And that is what all of the really successful institutional investment firms and money managers do out there. And they structure everything that way. And I think that's pretty sound. It's interesting. Everyone tries to compare to the S&P 500, which is that's the benchmark that a lot of people use, top 500 companies in the US. Again, it's a good benchmark. Okay. I'm not going to knock it. But if you think about it this way, that would be like you guys benchmarking your business to every other real estate business out there. And in a way, I know you kind of inherently do that, but it's also kind of odd because now you're not focusing on yourself, you're focusing on everyone else. And it goes back to the whole saying, all you can do is focus on you and control you.
Yeah.
So go back to the analogy of Bryan's business. Let's say 2020 was a down year. I'm making it up, or an up year. I don't really care. But let's say it was a down year and I'm looking at you from an investment standpoint. I'm like, you had a bad year and you were down relative to other real estate companies just based on the numbers. I'm not going to touch you. Versus I take a deep dive and I know, wow, you know what? Yeah, revenue was down. Like, I know Bryan. I know he knows everything about his business. He's gung-ho, rocking and rolling. It is a blip in a long period of success because that's the mentality you have. Therefore, dude, I'm gonna go invest in that. But I don't care if you guys were down compared to a real estate index. That's kind of silly.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm throwing a lot out at you guys and then people that choose to listen to this, but it's really valuable because if you're comparing yourself to these benchmarks, in fact, one of the episodes that we just had, Michael Odessis, who's a world-renowned mathematician, finance extraordinaire. He's one of the head professors at the University of Hong Kong.
He's smart.
He wrote a paper. Yeah. He wrote a paper on why benchmarking, it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And it actually may behoove you, which goes totally against the grain of what you go on TV and you're like, well, we're up against this, we're up against that. He just calls it like it is. A spade's a spade. And I think that's really valuable. You got to remove a lot of that emotion because the more emotional you get in what I do, I can't tell you when it's going to end, and I can't tell you what that end's going to look like, but I can tell you that ending won't look good.
Just business, not personal.
Well, Michael says business is the most personal thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, hey, you walk into our office, the first saying that we have on our doors and on our wall, never business family, always a family business. So, that's something that's really big and personal to me because it's funny. I was told a long time ago by someone I really admire and look up to that your greatest gift is your greatest curse. And I will tell you that reflecting on myself, one of the things that I take pride in is opening up and having a big enough heart to let people in. And you got to trust them until that trust is broken. And being in business, and Bryan, you and I can talk about that, business, personally, you name it, like you get your trust broken and you get your heart broken, and that stinks. And when people do say, and I know we were being facetious, it's just business, it's not personal, whatever. If you run your business separately like that, there will come a time where you're going to have to answer to that. And so I remember when I started, I was like, there's no way. I mean, when we have people come in, granted it's a little different right now, but I want to give them hugs and I want them to be part of the family. And yes, we run a business and they understand that, but they're part of the movement. They're part of this experience of being part of the family. And I think that's something to be celebrated, because it's really it's a dying art. It's a dying art. I mean, I know Bryan treats people like family too, and Jon, and you treat people like family too. You know how rare that is today? Jon saying no. Jon saying no. But it's really rare. It's really, really, really rare. I mean, I was reading a couple days ago, only about 7 to 8% of employees across the country actually feel like they are part of what's known as a family business. That's sad. That means 93 to 92% of everyone working just feels like they're a number. That sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah. Well, so as we kind of wind down, want to be mindful of your time. What is this? And that was, we did the South Sound Connection, which is kind of the introduction to some concepts. And we've talked a lot about personal concepts, and you brought up business. But what is there ways? I want to say I heard someone talk about recently, and I guess I don't know another way to break it down. But if your business you've got money sitting in savings, right? Mm-hmm. At what point does it make sense? Is this one of your areas that you work in where does it make sense for a business to invest aspects of their portfolio to have their money making money for them?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really, and yes, that was the right. I can see how that's kind of a weird concept to ask. You look at a lot of these publicly traded companies and massive corporations, they do that. I mean, they're all invested in each other.
Well, we work in the insurance world, and that's all your premiums, right? The insurance company doesn't make money on your premiums; they're making money on their investment of your little pittance.
Oh yeah, and they all insure each other. It's
and that's why they don't want you to draw on it when you have a water loss or a fire loss.
Yeah, well, but. So going back, because it is important to know. So I walk people through this all the time, whether they're clients, listeners, fans. So all a business is a person in a different entity form.
Sure.
Really think of it that way.
Yep.
So a lot of these tools that I teach people from a business standpoint, it works the exact same. So let's go through that. Personally, just a little free advice here. One of the first things you learn becoming a CFP, you want to make sure that you have whatever your monthly expenses are in checking, and then depending on your circumstance, 3 to 6 months in savings. Business, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you may need a little bit more cash depending on your business and depending on your comfort level. And we work with a client CPA to go through all of that. But then it comes to, like, if you have a smaller business, chances are you're not going to just open an account in your business's name. You're going to take a distribution because your accountant's going to say, hey, you've done this. Everything else is paid for. Let's take a distribution, and then you can go and invest that accordingly, or pay down a bad debt or whatever's prudent, right? That's very common to do. And if you have those checks and balances in place, it would be valuable to get that doing something. Right now, cash is not earning anything.
So right now, cash is trash.
Well, I wouldn't say cash is trash. Okay, that was good. But I would say once you have your checks and balances in order with a proper savings amount and your cash is stable and you're prudent with that, then it makes sense to get that money to be put to work. I mean, I'm even going a step farther saying I personally wouldn't rev the engine on a 3% mortgage right now. But if you're really nervous and anxious, you take a 0% interest rate on your money, because that's really what's earning now. And you bought a 3% payment on your mortgage or whatever that APR is, right? You basically just made 3%. That's what the spread is, right? or if you took that and you invested into something long term, whether it is market or real estate or even private equity or debt, which is becoming readily available to everyday people. It used to be, just a higher net worth thing, and
Right.
It's becoming readily accessible to the masses, and I actually think that's kind of cool. I don't think it's right for everyone, but chances are, okay, can't guarantee it, but assuming all things being equal, I would hope these businesses earn more than 0%, right? Like you'd kind of hope that.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's really smart to do, but it always comes down to, that's one where I think planners get a little ahead of themselves, and they'll go, well, I'll be the caller of that. It's like, no, talk to your CPA, because they understand the business ins and outs way more than a planner. And actually, in a lot of senses, as your business grows, more than the business owner themselves. We've got a couple clients that, revenue, you're talking 30, 40, 50 million dollars in revenue. It's pretty freaking hard if you're a CEO just going like, okay, back of the napkin math. It's like, no, you've got your controller, your CFO, your human resources doing all of that, so you can do CEO things, right? Or chairman things, or whatever your title is. I'm not really a title guy, but you get my point. And so relying on your CPA.
That's why you're an Oregon fan.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No. That's totally fair. That's totally fair. Man, this is a tough crowd. But my point is, if you do have a healthy business and you're talking to your CPA, you want to do that. I would actually go another step further and say, not only do you have an emergency fund within your business, this isn't an end all be all, but and most business owners get this. It's kind of a given, but you want to make sure you have an appropriate line of credit, right? And that adds another layer. We had someone talk a couple weeks ago, and they're like, well, I'm thinking about tapping into my line instead of my cash. I go, well, why are you doing that? Because the interest rate's a 7. Why are you taking a 7 to buy a 5? You just lost 2.
Yeah.
Right? -5 is 2. You don't want to go back. You don't want to go backwards. Sometimes you have to, but you don't want to go backwards.
Yeah.
Right? So I know that was a long-winded answer, but a lot of these things, it's not cut and dry. I wish it was. I mean, I'd probably be a lot more popular if I was just like, all your money on black, or do this, or do that, or whatever. But I would much rather be the tortoise than the hare. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, good, man. Any other closing thoughts then, as far as, that would be, the typical people probably listening to our podcast is, the small business owner, or, hopefully somebody that's just past the survival mode, right? They're, I'm nice and blurry. They maybe turning that corner to trying to do what's best for their business. And I think that's the other thing 2020 and maybe years even prior have kind of taught is you don't, there's a big swing in our industry for, either, go big or go home. And that's not the only way to be successful if you're smart with the way you use your money. So any other closing thoughts or things that we didn't get to touch on?
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you specifically for your industry, in the real estate and actually just blue collar industry in general, those are, depending on, I'm not going to make a blanket statement here, but more likely than not, those are pretty cyclical industries, right? You have good years, and then you kind of know the hump's coming. You got bad years. When it comes to clients that have those cyclical businesses, I advise them on, hey, if you're revving, now's the time to be as prudent as possible, because it can't last forever.
Yeah.
It cannot last forever. And so if you are having those good years, and yeah, I get it, you have to reinvest in your business. I would be a hypocrite if I said don't reinvest in your business. And they ask me, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm reinvesting everything into my business. Yeah. But there comes a point where once you do that, you got to start pulling that out. And I know it sounds cliche, but you got to diversify. And you got to be really prudent with that, because think about it this way. If you've kept reinvesting in your business, and then you start to have those down years, that can be a bummer, because then what happens? You don't have as much money in your business. Right. You're not making as much money in your business. Now you got to start making tough decisions on, do I go backwards and not eat? Do I have to fire people? Do I have to do both? Versus your business is growing and this cash is building up. That is, and this is the biblical side of me saying, that is God's way of saying, I am giving you this gift, and be a steward of it and be prudent with it, because it's not going to last forever. Okay. So when that time comes and you've pulled all of your money out, not all of it, but the prudent amount out, and you've got secondary pieces of income, well, guess what? You have a 2020 come around, and let's say your business does get hurt. Those passive pieces of income, I'm not saying anything specific, but those passive pieces of income are paying you. So guess what? As a business owner, you have a bad year. Well, guess what? Now you don't have to take as much of a salary because your investments are making you money.
Right.
Okay. Now everyone wins. Everyone wins. You take less of a salary. Boo-hoo. Okay. You're a business owner. You'll figure it out. You're going to be okay. All right. I know entrepreneurs well enough. That's the way that they work. The beautiful thing is your employees, they don't miss a blip. They don't know the difference. They might feel it, right? Because, the owner's probably freaking out, but they don't see the difference in their salary. So now the morale is huge, and they know, I don't even know what's going on behind the scenes, but our owner is bending over backwards to make sure that we don't miss a blip. And now you don't have to tap into a line of credit. So banks love you. Your CPA is going to now love you, because they don't have to do some crazy accounting to show that, your business maybe didn't do as bad, right? And then point blank, they don't want to come back and say, oh yeah, Bryan, for example, not only was your revenue down 25%, your taxes also went up. So sorry, dude, right? Like, they don't want that. And then the planner loves it, because you can look at a client and say, we've done all of that. We put all of these steps in place, and that's why it was so prudent to pull that money out. A couple of years ago, I was reading an article, and they on advisor perspectives, and the author, and I'm blanking on it, but regardless, he brought up this idea of business owners understand that they need to diversify, but there isn't a term out there to basically show you taking money out of your business and diversifying, to show that the more prudent you are with the money, the better chance of success you will have if there's a bad year in your business.
Sure.
Right. And I started implementing that indirectly probably 3 or 4 years ago, because I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. So for business owners out there, if you are having a good year, or you've had a good couple of years, and specifically you're in that blue collar industry where there is a cyclical nature to it, as Warren Buffett said, be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. When you're doing really, really well, you should be biting your nails.
Yeah.
Because it won't
ever.
But then on the flip side, when there is that bad period, and there will be a lull, and in white collar jobs, they don't get a pass. Okay. Like, other than taxes and death, you're going to have cyclical nature. Okay. But when you have those dips, and you have all of that prudency and that smarts and wits about your finances, and you've capitalized on it, like I teach people, you can look and go, I feel really good. Mm-hmm. And you can now be much more prudent with your money. And that's when you can maybe invest when everything's on a discount, because people are freaking out, and you can buy things that are really good for a discounted price.
Yeah.
So again, classic long-winded answer by Chris Panagiotu, but I might as well tell you what's right.
Yeah.
That's what I would close with. Be smart with your business. Be smart with your distributions. And then the last thing is, business owners out there, you have a God-given gift that people would kill to have. And what I mean by that is you've been able to not only create a business, but you've provided for your people. And if you're turning that corner, Jon, like you were saying, you're more than able to provide for your business. And we, in the Panagiotu household, my wife and I are very, very fortunate that we started turning that corner last year. And so now that we are turning that corner, make sure that you can give back in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't always have to be monetary, charity-wise. It can be with your time, but make sure that you do that. It will come back tenfold. And I think that is something that gets overlooked massively, because as entrepreneurs, we just focus on what do we need to do? What do we need to do?
Yeah.
It feels really good when you can say, okay, what can I give back to that I've worked so hard to do? Because frankly, a lot of people don't have that skill set, and that's okay. That's okay. But that's my closing piece of advice. Make sure to give back to others, because, you're going to be okay. And not everyone's born with your gifts.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, Chris, we've got the Capitalize, the podcast for intelligent investors up. Just a small plug for everybody. You also joined us for South Sound Connection. So there's some more advice there. What's the best way for people to follow and get a hold of you and to listen to the podcast? Absolutely.
So a couple ways. There's so many ways to get to continuously hear this angelic voice. Step number one, if you want to go on Spotify, type in Capitalize, a podcast for intelligent investors. Or you could type in Christopher Panagiotu, but no one knows how to spell the last name yet. Give it time. Once you get it, you'll understand it. So go on to Spotify, Capitalize, a podcast for intelligent investors. You can go through luciacap.com, and under their podcast tab, Capitalize is there. Google Play, Capitalize, a podcast for intelligent investors. Or give me a follow on LinkedIn. Every 2 weeks when I post on Monday, and my marketing team posts our episodes, I'll give a little plug on who I'm interviewing, what the topics of discussion will be, and encouraging you to tune in. And you'll be able to click directly right there. Eventually, those interviews are going to start to wane as I start taking people through Capitalize Your Finances, my framework. But those are the main areas: Spotify, luciacap.com, Google Play, or give me a direct follow on LinkedIn, and every 2 weeks I post my content.
Very good, man. Okay, Chris. Well, thank you for joining us again and for sharing your wealth of passion and knowledge on this area. So hopefully it goes out into the world and helps someone.
Absolutely. No, and this was fun, man. And I'd be totally down if you guys ever need me back. This was a good time. Yeah. Brian's a good guy too. So
I try to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anytime I get to see that lovely little face, I mean, the world is complete, even though he's not a Duck fan. So, but I will let you guys go. And no, this was good, man. This was good.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Nice guys.
Well, Bryan,
Jon,
this is the first where the whole posse's been together for 2021. So
band's back in town.
Badoop. Sorry again about the technical difficulties and the delay. I know millions of people were disappointed.
I'm used to it.
Any other thoughts? So yeah, I mean, we probably got to change the name of the show to Pro versus Pro or something, right?
Yeah, or All Pro versus Pro, something like that.
All Pro. There you go. Or we should just call it All American.
Yeah.
As we've been talking about the financial and things like that, obviously survived 2020. Any thoughts about 2021 and what you're looking forward to?
I can go to restaurants now. We can go and biz dev as we used to, which is nice.
Yeah.
Only 5 people.
Well, something Chris brought it up, David that I interviewed. People are talking about trying to do the podcast in person. We've never done that, so maybe we got to build out the studio
I guess cameras or something.
Well, that's
the webcam's not really wide enough.
Yeah, to do well, or the webcam would be on the other side of the room, and then so we shall see. But but glad to have you back.
Yeah, man.
What did you smoke tonight?
I had an Undercrown. It's the red label, which I've never had before. I normally have the white or the blue, so I saw this one earlier, and it was pretty good.
Nice, good smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Anything special for the beverage?
I had Buffalo Trace, one of my go-tos.
Okay.
What are you drinking over there in that purple can?
Purple can. This is the Silver City Brewery, so a local Washington brewery.
Where's that?
That's over Gig Harbor, just over on the peninsula.
Nice.
Silver City, yeah. And then I had a Gurkha Marquesa. That was a nice one. So.
You're a Gurkha guy.
Yeah, I've been enjoying them lately. So
yeah,
I'm not quite up to the level 5 smoke of Mr. Bryan Close. So.
No, it's hard to get here.
Yeah. It takes time, love, and tenderness, right?
That's right.
Well, cool, man. I know you got the littles and everything, so we'll have to do it again soon, hopefully.
Sounds good, bud.
All right. Thanks, Bryan.
Right, have a good night. Bye.
You too. Let's see.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.